So, Wuchang Fallen Feathers, the latest Souls-like to take the genre by storm, has arrived, and perhaps you've just started your journey, but are maybe finding things a little overwhelming or even obtuse. In fact, in my full review of the game, which you can check out via the link in the description, one of the negatives that I mentioned was that Wuchang throws a lot of systems and terminology at you right out of the gate, and that it can be a little much to take on. In today's video, I wanted to share with you 12 early game tips and tricks that I wish I knew before playing, designed in particular to help out with the early game, though many of them are handy to know throughout the remainder of your experience too. If you're already a seasoned Wuchang player, then the likelihood is that you probably won't need these, you'll probably already know them. But hey, if you enjoyed the video anyway, consider giving it a like, and maybe even subscribing for more, it all helps out. So let's get on with this thing. We've got 12 tips to get through. These tips will try to cover a holistic gamut of subjects in the game, from the systems to the combat to exploration and more. So let's dive right in. Very early in the game, right at the start, after arriving at the Revenant Temple, you'll come across a mysterious NPC called the Boatman. When you speak to the boatman, he'll transport you to a strange, watery arena where you unexpectedly come face to face with a boss called Bai Kru. Don't worry, you're not expected to win this, and losing to Bai Kru only sends you back to the Revenant Temple Shrine. All that's changed is you've gone back up the staircase you just came down. However, if you do manage to defeat Bai Kru at this early stage in the game, you'll be rewarded with 5 red Mercury essence. Red Mercury that's already been refined, and so is essentially just 5 free levels right off the bat. And look, like I said, you're not expected to win, but although intimidating, Bai Kru itself is not that hard to defeat, as it only possesses a few attacks, such as a leaping attack and a long-range water jet, both of which can be fairly easily avoided. Interestingly, the true battle with Bai Kru is actually an optional boss that's very easy to miss much later in the game. On my very first playthrough, I remember 20, 30 hours deep into the game, suddenly thinking, wait a minute, that boss at the very start was a totally unique enemy that I have never seen since. Where is this guy? And it turns out he is pretty well hidden. Okay, moving on, as you defeat enemies in the game, you'll earn Red Mercury, which is your currency in Wuchang Fallen Feathers, and the currency you use to level up as well. In order to level up, you need to refine your Red Mercury into Red Mercury Essence on the Impetus repository menu, after which you can use individual Red Mercury Essence to unlock nodes on the skill tree, which is the equivalent of leveling up in this game. But want to know if you have enough Red Mercury to refine while out and about in hostile territory? Simply take a look at the currency counter in the top right-hand corner of your screen. If the icon is glowing gold, that means you have enough Red Mercury on your person for at least one level. Early in the game, you'll unlock the Tempering menu, after you defeat the first major boss, I guess it is, which gives you access to various acupoints along your arm, which you can stimulate with needles in order to ignite your weapon with different elemental abilities. It's essentially Wuchang's version of, say, the fire paper from Bloodborne, but here it's been blown out into an entire system. Temperance can be used like a consumable, and its uses do replenish when you rest at a shrine. I remember initially being concerned that the needles were one-time consumables, like, say, fire paper. However, the key thing to note is that while Temperance can be used via your inventory, for better ease of use, you can actually just equip Temperance itself to your item hotkey bar, allowing you to add elemental effects to your weapon in the midst of battle much easier. Upon starting Wuchang Fallen Feathers, one of the only items you'll have in your possession is the Ancient Chisel. And it is easy, I think anyway, to dismiss these chisels as being purely narrative items in nature, But in actuality, you'll find them on the consumables page of your inventory for a reason. All of them have different abilities, and the first one you start with is actually particularly useful, especially if you find yourself struggling with a boss for a particularly long time. Using the ancient chisel respawns you at the last shrine you entered the dream in, which is a point we'll get to in a moment, at the cost of all of your red mercury. And the red mercury doesn't just drop, by the way, it gets used up completely, so it's a pretty steep price to pay. And that's why the ancient chisel is only really usable, in my opinion, if you've been struggling against a boss for a long time, because you may not have any red mercury left. And the reason you might want to use the ancient chisel is because alongside simply transporting you back to the last shrine you used, the last shrine you enter the dream at, doing so also grants your character a random buff. And it's a pretty significant buff too. As you can see here in the video, my health was increased dramatically. Now, when I say a random buff, in reality there's really only two it can choose from: greatly increasing your maximum health, or greatly increasing your maximum stamina. Increasing your health, as shown on screen currently, is indicated by the green glow around Wuchang, while increasing your stamina is indicated by a red glow. And these buffs last only for a few minutes, but when you've got no red mercury to lose anyway, it's completely free. So, the Ancient Chisel, like I said, is especially useful if you are struggling on a boss, you've burned through whatever red mercury you had on you if you didn't manage to spend it at the time. So if you currently don't have any red mercury to lose, every time you die and respawn, you can use the Ancient Chisel to grant yourself an additional buff, completely for free essentially, one that stacks on top of the buffs you also receive from items like the Aurum Feather. Speaking of shrines, while they do technically work in the same way as bonfires, sites of grace, lanterns, all of that sort of thing, in many ways they act as much more of a central hub than usual, allowing you to access basically every menu in the game. Because Wuchang Fallen Feathers, I would say, doesn't really have a central hub, there are a few kind of important locations, I think the game calls them, that you can visit over time: the Revenant Temple, Shu Sanctum, for example, but the majority of the menus and the systems that you would normally access at these places are instead accessed via the shrines. Now, in some ways it can feel like an unnecessary extra step. For example, why can't you just access Benedictions or Tempering from the main menu? But it does center everything around Wuchang's character growth and development in one place. Anyway, the point I'm getting to is that shrines don't work in quite the same way as the usual rest spots do in these kinds of games, in that simply interacting with them doesn't reset the world around you. Normally, resting at these waypoints, sitting at a bonfire, interacting with a lantern, that sort of thing, normally this will reset the enemies and the entire world around you. But in Wuchang, you need to not only interact with the shrine, but you then have to enter the dream as well in order to reset the enemies and advance the story. It is a specific action taken on this menu that is unique to shrines. But on the plus side, this is yet another system in the game that can be leveraged to your advantage. Perhaps a little later into the game, if you find yourself carrying more and more red mercury, this does mean that you can level up at a shrine without respawning the enemies, allowing you to use them strategically. Now, Wuchang Fallen Feathers breaks new ground for the Souls-like genre by going somewhere no other Souls-like has gone before. It introduces shrine mimics. Yes, even the lone safe spaces in the game can be turned against you, and before you know it, as you try to rest and recuperate, you're being pummeled by a walking shrine with immensely jacked arms and a really mean pirouette. Like the famous mimics of Dark Souls, there's something inherently comedic about these enemies. It's just so absurd, but it can be frustrating to have travelled so far, to be carrying so much red mercury, to glimpse that shrine on the horizon that you've been waiting for so long, only to be killed as you reach the one place that's supposed to be safe, as these gigantic arms and legs suddenly burst out of this thing. However, it is possible to identify these fake shrines early. On the outside, they look identical to normal shrines, save for one crucial difference: that you need to keep an eye out for. Where the normal shrines depict an elderly, monk-like figure perched within them clutching an instrument of some kind, the fake, mimic shrine version of this figure looks exactly the same, except they aren't holding anything at all. And identifying this upon approach allows you to get the drop on the mimics, as you can damage them without interacting with them first. Leveling up your Manna Vase, this game's version of the Estus Flask, is, for the most part, handled in the same way as other Souls-likes, by finding forgotten remembrances and lost remains out in the game world, both of which are found in the huge ornate gold chests. You can level up your vase to increase both the amount of uses the vase has and how much health it restores with each use. However, unlike other Souls-likes, it is not immediately clear how you use these items. Normally you would just take them to a rest point and be able to use them there, but not so here. In Wuchang Fallen Feathers, you first need to access the Impetus repository, as is generally the way, and start working on the central skill tree, the one that spreads out to the left of the tree from the middle, and the only one that doesn't focus on a specific weapon type. That's because this central skill tree instead deals with your universal traits, buffing things like your Temperance, your Feathering, your Madness, and more, including your Manna Vase. However, you don't need to have any red Mercury essence to level up the Manna Vase. So long as you have found the required item, you'll be able to unlock the node. When I first started Wuchang Fallen Feathers, I was expecting to have to max out individual weapons, as is the case with all other Souls-likes. However, the system has been streamlined greatly in this game, and instead you access upgrade nodes on the Impetus repository to power up your different weapon types. As with most Souls-likes, these weapons can be upgraded to plus 10 over the course of the game, but the key here is all weapons of a type are upgraded at once. They are upgraded at the same time. This is because these upgrade nodes are a part of each weapon type's individual skill tree on the repository. So for example, as you progress down the longsword skill tree, you'll come across nodes that upgrade your longsword mastery, and these enhance every single longsword you own equally, applying that +1 buff to all of them. And that's because you're not getting better with individual weapons. Wuchang is becoming more skilled with the individual weapon type, as noted by the name. Longsword mastery, axe mastery, one-handed sword mastery, you get the idea. Next, throughout the game world, you'll stumble across these strange glowing blue markers that seem to signify a point of interest, but don't seem to do anything. Upon interacting with them, they'll often tell you to do something cryptic, with the action highlighted in blue. But at least on the surface, there doesn't appear to be any way to do these actions. However, when faced with one of these, you simply need to perform the corresponding gesture. On the PS5, the gesture menu is accessed by pressing the right side of the touchpad. By performing the correct gesture, you'll either receive an item or a piece of dialogue relating to Wuchang's mysterious past. Note that the highlighted text doesn't always refer to the gesture verbatim, but they're usually pretty easy to figure out. For example, if one tells you to pay your respects, well, there's no such gesture called pay your respects, but instead you need to use the worship gesture, which again I think is fairly self-explanatory. Madness is an interesting resource that needs to be managed carefully, but being at full madness brings many benefits. For example, you deal more damage, though you take more damage too to compensate, and you also receive more red mercury from killing enemies, which is a tidbit the game really tucks away kind of out of view. If you die while at full madness, your inner demon will spawn where you dropped your mercury, and you'll have to kill it to receive your spoils. However, this too can be used strategically, as the inner demon will attack everything in sight, not just you. Using the inner demon is also great in that way for drawing the attention of enemies, generally speaking the enemy that probably killed you last time. The very first time I died and manifested the inner demon, I had been killed by a powerful enemy, as you'd expect, and so my demon spawned right next to them, and they duked it out, while I took care of the weakened winner as a result. The key is not to be afraid of madness. there's really very few serious downsides to manifesting the inner demon, both in yourself and externally upon death. In fact, you can even buy items by invoking madness, by growing crazier, essentially, I guess. Though I'll be honest, I don't think I did that even once. What do the different symbols mean on the Benediction menu? Like I said, there are a lot of systems and subsequent menus in Wuchang, and even the menus have menus. On the Benediction menu, you may have noticed that some of the individual relics also have a strange mark on the bottom right of their icon. This mark indicates that the relic in question belongs to a specific set, and will stack an additional effect called a set effect if equipped as part of a complete set of 3 onto your weapon. So while each of the individual Benediction runes will grant you their specified effect, to get an additional effect, you need to equip 3 Benediction runes that share that same icon in the bottom corner as well. For example, the effect shown here on screen is called Skyborn Plume, and it will only activate on top of the other Benediction effects after the full set of 3 matching Benediction runes have been equipped, and that's indicated by the orange flame at the bottom of the menu. If you've got that flame, you've got the additional set effect. And the game will tell you, by the way, when you have just 1 or 2 runes that are part of a set. It will indicate 1 of 3 of the set effect items. However, to make things a little trickier for you, after starting your first New Game Plus, you'll begin to receive +1 versions of the runes themselves, and these will not stack with the base versions, even if they are of the same set. These +1 runes are counted as a totally separate layer of items. Finally, parrying works differently in Wuchang, though it's still a viable option for the most part. But there's no denying that dodging is the primary combat option in the game, and as a result, parrying is limited to a discipline skill, which is a skill locked to L2 on the controller that has to be manually equipped on a weapon, and sometimes consumes Skyborn Might to work. Not only that, but parrying works differently depending on the weapon type you're using. For example, the longsword has a more traditional parry that I used called the sword counter, which also doesn't consume any Skyborn Might and has a pretty generous timing window as well. However, it only works on enemies using bladed weapons. Nothing else can be parried in this way, and there aren't that many enemies using bladed weapons in the game. However, there are a few key bosses that use them, and that's where I got the most use out of the parry. Similarly, the axe has a blocking option, which is also a discipline skill. However, as it says on the tin, that is just a block. It doesn't work in the same way. So while parrying isn't likely to be the main way you play the game, though it is much more viable if you go the longsword route, it is an option. And it is absolutely vital, in my opinion, against certain bosses, again especially if you're using the longsword, such as the notorious Commander Honglan. Alright, but that's 12 early game tips and tricks for Wuchang Fallen Feathers that I hope you find useful. Like I said at the start of the video, if you are already a seasoned Wuchang player, hell, you might have already finished the game by now, to be honest, we're what, 5 days deep? Then you probably won't need these at all, but maybe you're just starting out on your journey, or you have tried to start out and the game isn't clicking with you. Maybe these can be of some help. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. If any of these helped you at all, if maybe any of these you didn't know or you were unsure of, do let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I would love to know. And of course, let me know your thoughts on Wuchang Fallen Feathers in general. Have you picked up the game? Are you playing it? What's your performance like? On PS5 Pro, as I mentioned in my review, I had no real issues whatsoever with the performance, but it really hasn't gone down great on PC in particular, though I do think Lean Z have pretty diligently issued a number of performance patches since release, so hopefully the game is looking a lot better. Let me know your thoughts and experiences down in the comments. Alright everyone, once again, thank you so very much for watching. Consider hitting subscribe if you haven't done already. A massive thank you and a welcome to all of the new subscribers we've gained over the last couple of days or so. You are very welcome here and your support does make all the difference in the world. Alright everyone, thank you so very much for watching once again. Until next time, I'll catch you later and let's talk games again.